Welcome to the third dimension. As Ukraine and now Sudan continue to grab headlines in the Western media, the world should not lose sight of the Yemen war. Since 2014, Yemen has suffered from a disastrous conflict that evolved into a proxy war between rival regional powers. While the recent Chinese-mediated rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran sparked hope for a negotiated end to the war, Yemenis have yet to see any meaningful peace talks. To discuss this topic, join me here in the studio, Dr. Abdullah Hamouda. Dr. Abdullah Hamouda is a senior Middle East analyst. He is a member of the Royal Institute for International Affairs London and editor-in-chief of timesofegypt.com. His contribution and analyses have featured in different media platforms. Welcome to the third dimension, Dr. Abdullah.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Okay. Now, before we get into analyses of the dynamics of the conflict of Yemen, if at the start I would like to ask Abdullah Hamouda, what does Yemen mean to him and how would he reflect his own experience with Yemen and Yemen politics?
Yemen means a lot to me and to my family because the origin of my family come from Yemen, from Uruq bin Hamouda in the north of Hadramaut, northeast of Hadramaut. I was brought up and spent my formation years in the 1950s and 60s when it was the golden years of the Arabian nationalism. And I was conscious of what is going on. I was reading a lot. I was thinking a lot as a child, and I was a regular speaker in the morning session of the school, wherever I was since very young. And I was brought up at the time of Nasser. When I was at secondary school, I had some Yemeni friends school. They came to the school and spent some time with us between 1962 and 65, and at university between 65 and 69. A number of Yemeni friends came and spent some time with us. They did not go the whole 4 years. One of them, who discovered me later on when I went to Yemen, was Abdullah. He was a colleague for some terms. Some Yemeni youth came to Egypt. They spent some time at university and then they did other things, training to work in politics. I have lived all through that until, as a journalist, in the late 80s and early 90s, I was picked up by the editor of Al-Sharq Al-Awsat, Mr. Uthman Al-Umair, to work on Yemen and the Gulf. I had experience of the Gulf in the years before, but Yemen was new to me as a professional journalist. And I think Uthman Al-Umair was bright enough to pick me up as an Egyptian because he wanted someone who could have an opportunity to know Yemen inside out. I did not disappoint him, but it was my pleasure to keep going to Yemen and learning about Yemen and feeling Yemeni.
I see. So from this personal and professional background about Yemen, In the past, if we talk about the state of affairs now, how would you describe the regional and international power efforts in terms of pushing peace in Yemen?
The Arab world is not in the best state one can aspire to see it. Unfortunately, things have been going down for us, and we have been in the position of that will be in the Arabic culture an insult, but we have been the underdog of the world, and the whole region has been the playground for so many parties for their own interest.
Yeah. If we focus on Yemen.
In Yemen, unfortunately, there has been a failure on the part of the political power, authority, government, you name it, political organizations, etc. Everyone knows that Yemen has a great potential. Most of all, the human being, the Yemeni persona. And there are resources which are unused and are wasted. And it is a problem of management and problems of failure to catch up with development in the world. That is coupled with a view from other Gulf countries as looking at Yemen as the poor brother, and trying to upstage them in so many ways, and the lack of vision on the political power in Yemen to try and map up a plan, a vision, and have a vision for developing the country. It has been an accumulation of so many factors put together, in addition to being subservient to foreign interests and trying to appease the powers to be in the world, like any other Arab country. This is our problem, and the neglect of the basic needs of the Yemeni people.
Yeah. So if you say political actors, local political actors in Yemen have failed, or they lack a vision to what we call regain the state, yes. How would you assess the role of the United Nations in this respect in alleviating the pain of Yemenis?
The United Nations is one of the organizations set up by the international order after the Second World War, and it is used by the powers to be, means the United States, as tools of implementing, exercising, enhancing the American and Western interest in the world. They try to do things, but I don't have faith that they work to solve the problems as much as they adopt the approach of crisis management rather than crisis problem solving. Yeah.
I see. So you said that the United Nations follows what we call, or the United States policy. Now, we have seen recently that the UN Special Envoy, this time, instead of going to the West, he went to the East, he went to Japan, and he visited China. So he said he is what we call mobilizing an international momentum to end the Yemeni crisis.
Okay.
So how would you comment on this?
2 points. The first one is that Japan is part of the world order, Western. China is the rising power and unstoppable power. And people wake up to try and deal with it. China has succeeded in concluding a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And that was like a wake-up call to the whole world that China can get things done. America could have done that long time ago, but instead they spent their time trying to frighten Gulf countries of Iran, and in order to justify selling them arms which have never been used in war. For the United Nations envoy to do this, I think it is something remarkable, but still symbolic, because China is resisted when it tries to have an input into solving some regional crisis. And I'll wait to see what would transpire out of that.
Okay, so you mentioned in this answer the Saudi-Iran rapprochement, okay? So how do you think Yemen can benefit out of this rapprochement?
I think Yemen can benefit a great deal. The Saudis are one party in the war in Yemen with the so-called Arab Alliance. I don't know how many members in that alliance. And Iran provides support for the Houthis who are in power in Sana'a. We all know the kind of tension in the relation between Iran and Saudi Arabia. To culminate that, it will help a great deal. And we saw a Saudi delegation going to Sana'a and the release of some war prisoners. But we need to build on that. I mean, not only as Yemenis, but as an Arabs and as international community to build on that in order to achieve something tangible. It looks up in the air until now, and it needs a great deal of work to be done. And recognizing the parties to the conflict. No one party is able to rebuild Yemen. Everyone has to contribute, and everyone's role has to be respected. Unfortunately, for any party to try and cancel the other does not work. And we have to achieve a kind of formula which can accommodate everyone and try to urge everyone to respect and consider the contribution of others.
Yeah. So as you raised it now, and you talked about the kind of normalization between Saudi Arabia and Houthis, 2 days back, the first flight from Sana'a airport arrived at Saudi Arabia carrying what we call Yemeni pilgrims since 2015. Yes. Okay. Now, there are claims, Mr. Hamouda, that this kind of rapprochement between Saudis and Houthis can, what we call, exclude other anti-Houthi factions like the Presidential Council, like the government. So how do you react to this?
No, I don't think you can exclude the Presidential Council because it is seen as the legitimacy. But you cannot exclude the Houthis because they are the status quo, the powers in Yemen, in North Yemen. And you cannot exclude the Southerners as well with all their organizations. But you need to achieve consensus and you need to get everyone around the table and let them talk to each other and facilitate that talk. We don't, I mean, the Arab persona.
Yeah.
The Arab wish is to have everyone talking to each other with the belief that no one can cancel anyone, because everyone who has raised arms and secured a position in power has to be around the table. And there has to be some kind of fair negotiation and put them before their responsibilities towards the country in order to get it moving forward.
Okay. Now, if we move to something else now, Mr. Hamouda, as a UK-based journalist now, you've been there almost for 4 decades, perhaps, or more than that, perhaps.
Next year will be 50.
The fifth, okay, okay. So the question is, how would you assess the United Kingdom's engagement in the Yemeni file?
I recall a conference on Yemen back in 2014-15 for the donors to Yemen, and I felt that the discussion was to try and secure funds to ease the situation in Yemen from the Gulf countries, with the US and the UK acting as the fund managers. They don't want to put money themselves, but they manage funds raised by others, which I don't find fair. They have to make contribution themselves. And because when they spend the money donated by the Gulf countries, that money is used to buy British and American products to be used in Yemen. So they are looking for business, not looking for aid. Britain is the closest party to the United States and works with the United States and under the auspices of the United States. They don't have a policy independent themselves, but they make a sizable contribution to the United States policy in the region. And they can work diplomatically with parties in Yemen who still have faith in the United Kingdom and its role. And people from the south, especially, feel that Britain has still a degree of credibility. That could work, but I don't see they are willing to work. If there was the size of fatalities and the problems which take place in Yemen, if it was in European country, they would have moved very fast. But I think the Arabs and people from the third world look like the children of a lesser god.
I see. Yeah. I asked about the role or assessing the role of the UK because the United Kingdom is what we call the pen holder in the United Nations Security Council in terms of Yemen. Any resolution should be drafted by the UK and should be adopted by the UK and its partners. That's why I asked about the role of the United Kingdom.
The United Kingdom can make a contribution if there was a will in the international community to make a solution. The opposition of the United States to any role Iran can play in the Yemeni crisis has held back the possibility of achieving peace. Now that there is a reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, I think we have an opportunity to move forward.
Okay. Now, you said also in the previous answer that if the problem was in Europe, perhaps the United Kingdom and even the West could have accelerated the solution.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, again, as a UK-based journalist, how would you assess what we call claims of Western media bias when they deal with Middle East problems, in comparison to what is happening in Ukraine?
No, Ukraine is a totally different kettle of fish. Ukraine is a problem at the level of the international world order. The fight in the Ukraine is fight about the future of the West as a leaders and trying to stall back the rise of China. I see the Ukraine as a playground or a testing, or if we call it in Arab terms, the boy in the middle who is being hit by everyone else. But the West have been trying to provoke Russia for a long time, and they have been working to extend their membership east. And you should never forget their leap to Afghanistan in 2001.
Yeah.
Because I see it as like launching an arrow under the belly of the Russian bear towards China. So this is what it means in my view. They had to leave, but they still have a finger in the pie.
So if we come
they wanted
to the point of media bias.
The media, there are priorities for the media in the United Kingdom. First come the UK news. Second, the US news. Third, the EU news. Fourth, the Commonwealth news. Fifth, any part of the world outside the EU, the Western Alliance, and the Commonwealth countries. And that is prioritized as well. There was a discussion in London some time ago, and someone said that it is enough for a car accident with a British person killed to appear as a headline, but it takes between 100 and 500 fatalities in the third world to appear in the news.
I see. Okay. So in the end, Mr. Hamouda, how do you assess or how do you see the prospects of peace in Yemen? Peace scenarios?
I think we need some will on the part of the Yemenis to achieve peace and to stop trying to propagate against each other. We need the interest of Yemen to be truly expressed by the parties. We need someone to facilitate, mediate, and host a working conference which will take some time to achieve some kind of agreement, and to try and prepare some drafts which can be acceptable by the parties, workable by the parties, and unfortunately, while it is so urgent, it is a long way ahead.
I see. Okay. So with that remark, we come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much, Mr. Hamouda, for making it here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
With this, we come to the end of this interview. See you next time with a new edition of The Third Dimension.